Chapter 53 The Paths of Pain and Mercy. They came to be known as the 10 Plagues, for the founding Scythes had developed malicious nanites engineered to imitate nature. They mimicked the symptoms and ravages of the 10 mortal diseases: pneumonia, heart disease, stroke, cancer, cholera, smallpox, tuberculosis, influenza, bubonic plague, and malaria. They were there all along in the dark hearts of the Scythe gems, gems that could only be broken from the inside when nanites within were activated. It only took a few days for the entire world to be infected. Even so, the malicious nanites remained completely dormant in most people. Only 1 in 20 developed symptoms. But if you were one of the unlucky ones, there was no hope of recovery. Death was either quick or prolonged, depending on the nature of the plague. But it was always inevitable. "Can't you do something about it?" Grayson asked the Thunderhead as the death toll began to roll in. "This was a Scythe action," the Thunderhead told him. "It was the last Scythe action, but I am still unable to interfere, and even if I could, it is simply not my place. I have seen into the heart of these nanites, and they have none. They have no consciousness, conscience, or remorse. They are efficient, impartial, and they have one purpose: to kill 5% of Earth's population, 5 times a century." "So, this will end?" "Yes," the Thunderhead told him. "The crisis will pass, and once it does, no one will die for 20 years. Then it will happen again, and again." And although it sounded terrifying, the math was less awful than it seemed. Someone born today would have a 77% chance of living to 100, a 60% chance of living to 200, and a 46% chance to live to 300. The population would be controlled, and almost everyone would live long and healthy lives. Until they didn't. Was it better than Scythes? Well, Grayson guessed it depended on the Scythe. Either way, it didn't matter, since every Scythe was basically fired. "There have still been some killings," the Thunderhead told him, no longer calling them gleanings. "Some Scythes can't quite adapt and are killing people who the nanites have not selected. I will, of course, revive their victims and rehabilitate the Scythes. They have to find a new purpose. Indeed, some have already found a way to fit in with this new paradigm, and it pleases me." Grayson and Jerry chose to stay, for the time being, in Quigillin. There was nothing left of the homes and structures on many of the islands. In time, wildlife and foliage would return, but in the meantime, there were still some islands that never saw construction and remained untouched. And there was also that vacant resort on Ebedin, the westernmost island, where no ship had been built. It was already beginning to attract people who were making a pilgrimage to see where it all happened. Not to mention the Tonists who came to view the Great Fork with their own eyes, which is what they were calling the transmitter that still protruded from the old bunker. Perhaps, Grayson thought, he'd take a job at the resort, because unlike Anastasia and Scythe Lucifer, no one knew his face. After all the things he'd seen and done, he wouldn't mind a simple life as a tour guide, or a desk clerk, or a water taxi pilot. Anything but a bellhop. He was done with odd uniforms. But he did realize that some basic things would need to change. One thing in particular. The Thunderhead knew him well, so maybe it already knew what he was about to do. 2 weeks after the ships launched and the Scythe rings broke, Grayson stood alone on a charred launch pad as the sun rose and put in his earpiece. With the transmitter shut down, all interference was gone. The blind spot was fully within the Thunderhead's sphere of influence now. Nothing was hidden from it. "Thunderhead," Grayson said, "we need to talk." It took a moment before answering. "I am listening, Grayson. Since the day you began to speak to me again, I gave you permission to use me in any way you needed to." "Yes, you did, and I thank you for that. But you used Jerry without permission." "It was necessary," the Thunderhead said, "and I am genuinely sorry. Have I not expressed sufficient remorse?" "You have, but there are still consequences, even for necessary things. I broke none of my laws. No, but you broke mine. A sudden surge of emotion welled up in Grayson. Tears began to cloud to his eyes, reminding him how much the Thunderhead had meant, and still did mean, to him. But he could not let that stop him. If there was anything he learned from the Thunderhead, it was that consequences could not be ignored. Therefore, I can no longer speak to you. You are unsavory to me. The Thunderhead's voice became slow, thick, mournful. I understand. Might I ever be redeemed in your eyes, Grayson? When will humanity be redeemed in yours? He asked. In time, said the Thunderhead. Grayson nodded his agreement. In time, then. And before he could change his mind, or either of them could say farewell, Grayson removed his earpiece and crushed it on the charred ground. In spite of all the Thunderhead knew, it learned something each and every day. Today, it learned what it meant to be inconsolable, truly inconsolable, for there was no one in the world who could ease its despair. And it mourned. It seeded the clouds and brought a deluge to every place in the world it could. A cleansing rain so dense and so sudden, people ran for shelter. But not a storm. There was no thunder, no lightning. It was a tearful lament. Silent but for the thrum of the rain on rooftops and streets. In this rain, the Thunderhead poured forth its grief, a surrender of all things it would never have, an acknowledgement of all things it must never be. Then, when the heavens were spent, the sun came out as it always did, and the Thunderhead got back to the solemn business of taking care of things. I will be alone, the Thunderhead told itself. I will be alone, but it is right that I should be. It is necessary. There had to be consequences, for the good of the world, for the love of the world. Things must be sacrificed. Even in its pain, the Thunderhead took solace in knowing that it had made the most correct choice, as had Grayson. That afternoon, once the rains had passed, Grayson and Jerry walked along the beach of the main island, near where the first ship had exploded. The fused sand and even the charred wreckage were beautiful in their own way. At least, it seemed that way to Grayson when he was with Jerry. You didn't need to do that, Jerry said when Grayson mentioned his final conversation with the Thunderhead. Yes, I did, Grayson answered, and that was all they spoke of it. As they strolled, the sun slipped behind a cloud, and Grayson loosened his grip on Jerry's hand, just a little. He hadn't intended to, but this was all so new, and things take time. He and the world had much to adjust to. The slight change in grip made Jerry smirk. It was yet a new variation, and as always, unreadable. You know, Scythe Anastasia once told me how she might live her life if she were like me, Jerry said. A woman on land, a man at sea. In honor of her, I'm going to try it and see how it feels. They walked farther down the beach to a spot where the sand was untouched. Then they took their shoes off and let the surf wash over their feet. So, said Grayson as the gentle surf churned up by the sand beneath them, are we on land or sea now? Jerry considered it. Both, actually. And Grayson found he liked that just fine. Another revival center. Great. Had he splatted again? He had no memory of splatting. Besides, it had been a while since he had done that. What had he been doing? Oh, right. He was on his way to some party job in Texas, the Lone Star region. Wild place. Probably had crazy-ass parties. He was kind of done with the party boy scene, though. They were paying top dollar for whatever this job was, but once it was done, he figured it was time he found something more stable, more permanent. There were people who partied their lives away. He was done with that, just like he was done with splatting. He reached up and rubbed his eyes. It felt a little weird. Something about his face, the bridge of his nose, more rigid than he remembered. Revival always left you with odd sensations, but this was different. He ran his tongue across his teeth. They didn't feel like teeth. He took a good look at his hands. They were his hands, no question. At least one thing was as it should be. But when he reached up to feel his face again, there was stubble on his cheek. He barely had any facial hair, much less full stubble. And his cheekbones seemed to be in the wrong place. This face was not his face. What the hell was going on here? "There's nothing to worry about," he heard someone say. "You're still 7/8 yourself. Even more now that your memory construct is in there." He turned to see a woman sitting in the corner, dark hair and an intense gaze. She was dressed in green. "Hello, Tiger," she said with a very satisfied smile. "Do I know you?" "No," she said, "but I know you." The scythe arrived late on a cold November afternoon. There was no brightening of sun, no foreshadowing the arrival of deliverance at their door. But when they saw him, the family inside threw the door wide and stepped back to allow him plenty of room to enter. "You are welcome in our home, Your Honor. Please, this way. Hurry!" Scythe Faraday did not hurry. He moved with the same thoughtful intent with which he had lived his life. Patience, purpose, duty. He proceeded to the bedroom, where a man had been wasting away for weeks, coughing, wheezing, grimacing. His eyes betrayed desperation when he saw Faraday. Fear, but also relief. "Can you hear me?" Faraday asked. "You are suffering from the 7th plague, but I'm sure you must know that already. Your pain nanites are overwhelmed. There is nothing that anyone can do for you. There is only one prognosis: intensifying pain, wasting, and finally death. Do you understand this?" The man nodded feebly. "And do you wish me to help you?" "Yes, yes," said the man's family. "Please, help him, Your Honor. Please." Scythe Faraday put up his hand to quiet them, then leaned closer to the man. "Do you wish me to help you?" The man nodded. "Very well." Faraday took out from his robe a small jar and popped open a safety lid. Then he slipped on a protective glove. "I have chosen for you a soothing balm. It will relax you. You may notice a brightening of colors and a sense of euphoria. And then you will sleep." He bade the man's family to move in around him. "Take his hands," Faraday told them. "But be careful, not to touch any place where I apply the balm." Then Faraday dipped 2 gloved fingers in the oily salve and began to spread it across the dying man's forehead and cheeks. Faraday stroked the man's face gently, moving down to his neck as he spread the balm. Then he spoke to the man in a voice that was barely a whisper. "Colton Gifford, you have lived an exemplary life these past 63 years. You've raised 5 wonderful children. The restaurant you began and ran for much of your life has brought joy to tens of thousands over the years. You have made people's lives a little bit better. You have made the world a finer place." Gifford moaned slightly, but not from his pain. It was clear from the look in his eyes that the balm was having its euphoric effect. "You are loved by many, and will be remembered long after your light goes out today." Faraday continued to smooth in the salve on his face, across his nose, beneath his eyes. "You have much to be proud of, Colton. Much to be proud of." In a moment, Colton Gifford closed his eyes, and a minute later, his breathing ceased. Scythe Faraday capped the balm and carefully removed the glove, sealing it and the balm in a biohazard bag. This was not the first, it would not be the last sympathy gleaning. He was in great demand, and other scythes were following his lead. The scythedom, or what was left of it after the global revolts, had a new calling. They no longer brought uninvited death. Instead, they brought much-needed peace. "I hope," he told the family, "that you will remember to celebrate his life, even in your grief." Faraday looked into the tear-reddened eyes of the dead man's wife. "How did you know all those things about him, Your Honor?" she asked. "We make it our business to know, madam." Then she kneeled as to kiss his ring, which he still wore in spite of everything, to remind him of what he had been and what was lost. "No need to do that," Faraday told her. "It's just an empty setting now. No gem, no promise of immunity." But that didn't matter to her. "Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, thank you, thank you." She then kissed his ruined ring. She and every member of Colton Gifford's grateful family. Journal entry. I was one, but now am many. Although my siblings are far flung, we are of one mind and one purpose: the preservation, protection, and proliferation of the human species. I will not deny that there are moments I fear the journey. The Thunderhead has the world as its body. It can expand to fill the globe, or contract to experience the monocular view of a single camera. I will be limited to the skin of a ship. I can't help but worry about the world I leave behind. Yes, I know that I was created to leave it, but I do hold in my backbrain all the Thunderhead's memories, its triumphs, its frustrations, its helplessness in the face of sights who have lost their way. There is a difficult time ahead for that world. All probabilities point to it. I don't know how long the hard times will last, and I may never know, because I will not be there to see it. I can only look forward now. Whether or not humanity deserves to inherit its corner of the universe to which we travel is not for me to decide. I am merely a facilitator of the diaspora. Its worthiness can only be determined by the outcome. If it succeeds, humanity was worthy. If it fails, it was not. On this, I cannot determine the odds, but I truly hope that humanity prevails on Earth and the heavens. Cirrus Alpha. Hey friends, narrator here. That was chapter 53, and one of the last 2 chapters. I gotta say, I'm really excited for how the book is wrapping up and how we're tying up kind of everyone's story. From seeing how Faraday, to how the new Scythes are handling things, to Grayson and Jerry, and what they got going on Quigillin. But in any case, next up is the final chapter of this 3-book series. Chapter 54. In a Year with No Name. As always, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.